you are an actor and a producer, but really turned towards producing in a concerted way, I think about 4 years ago. Maybe it was during the pandemic you originally told me. I talk about the shift, and maybe in talking about the shift, Clay, give us a little bit of context for the role that performing played in your life up to that point, and maybe any of the inherently entrepreneurial stuff that was always in the background that then sort of went, you know what, I'm gonna shift here and focus on this a bit more.
Well, I'll start by saying life punishes the vague wish and rewards the specific ask. And prior to being a producer, I was a bit vague. I, want to be on Broadway, want to keep performing, I didn't even know what that meant. And then as I thought back towards like my childhood, going into college, deciding what to do, I was like, oh, I'll go perform in theater and use that as a catapult to go do films. Cause that's what I always wanted to do, is perform in film. But then somewhere along the way, you kind of lose that, with a little bit of vagueness. And so, I also believe that life gives you signs and they get louder if you don't listen to them. It starts like a tap on the shoulder and then you get pushed and the whole brick wall falls down and you're like, I didn't see that coming. And if you look back, there were signs that were kind of leading you towards that, maybe in like a bad relationship or something. But that was happening in terms of the people I was meeting and the books I was reading that led to this whole producing thing. In the summer when I was lifeguarding, I started reading self-help books. And first book I picked up was How to Get What You Want. I was like, oh, this is great. I can manipulate people into getting what I want. And the entire book proceeded to tell me everything that was wrong with me and how I needed to evolve as a being to go along. And my whole
like what were some of the specific things in there that sort of stuck out to you, if you recall?
Body language. So sitting with your legs and your arms crossed. Having that resting bitch face, as we say, those sort of things.
Yes.
And communicating, asking more questions than giving more statements. Because, I do think your life evolves and grows based on the quality of the questions you ask. And a lot of us just make statements to people like, I want you to do this. You're not hearing me. As opposed to like, do you hear me? Or what did you hear from what I said? And all of a sudden we're having like an actual conversation and evolving, together. So I was doing that for myself. I was doing that with the people around me. I was reading more of those books. And I went to a reading very last minute at the Dakota. And I ran into these two guys retiring, air quotes, if you can see it, from finance and going into producing. And they were like, you know what? We like your point of view. We like, who you are. Why don't you come have this conversation with us? So I started working with them as a creative consultant for 2 years. Before, and this was very casual. I was still performing. It wasn't like a paid thing. They just send me stuff, get your take. We're sussing each other out. And the pandemic hit while I was on the Waitress tour. And it was in that moment where it was like those signs were getting louder. And I also found that performing, I wasn't really happy. Like I was on this tour and I wasn't really enjoying it. Like I enjoyed the singing aspect, but everything around it was just not for me. And I also was now at this point reading Conscious Capitalism by the guys who created Whole Foods. Great book. Your True North.
I'm writing these down.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I can give you a list afterwards too.
Please.
Pretty much anything Tony Robbins, which might be a hot take for some people. Yeah. Tim Ferriss, Gary Vaynerchuk, which we talked about. And I was having that realization of like, oh, I can build things. I can actually take my creativity and all of this like self-help that I've learned and actually evolve companies and kind of leave the world better than I found it. And I realized as an actor, you're waiting for things to come to you. And as a producer, you're finding them. And what's amazing, I mean, this is something that if you can understand this concept, you can really excel in life, which is it's all about persistence. You don't have to be incredibly intelligent. You don't have to be incredibly talented. You just have to be persistent. Within reason, with respect, working on quality things. But that has just blown my mind when it comes to producing because I get no's every day, but you just keep going and eventually you find the yes. I mean, seek and ye shall find kind of thing.
That's